cortege would go through some principal streets of Accra to give Ghanaians the opportunity to also pay their last respect. So I would expect to see that, and also bring you the final burial of the late former Vice President. We also know that what we refer to as the final funeral rites will be held at the State House. Kojo.
Yes, and of course we will expect the family to follow this procession as it goes through some of the main streets of Accra, giving some Ghanaians an opportunity to have a final encounter with the man who has played such a big role in our political and economic history. And of course, every person there has their own memory of their encounter with the former Vice President. Later we'll be hearing some prominent Ghanaians talk about these encounters and the memories that they will continue to have and carry with them of this man and the life he's lived, the impact he's had. But isn't it fascinating that on a day like this, this being sort of the second day, if you will, of the activities to earmark the final journey of the former Vice President. On this day, the second day, after 24 hours have already been and gone, people still feel quite fresh the emotion of his loss. And you can see on their faces as they sat in the auditorium, you know, people were really still quite heavily hit by the departure of the former Vice President, weren't they?
Yes, Kojo, they were, and even on social media, some of the comments we are picking up, and also because his death was quite sudden, you know, when the news hit the nation, it sent a lot of shockwaves, and I think that people have still not recovered from that particular shock. It's interesting to note, and we saw the appreciation his family rendered to all Ghanaians and to the president. His brother, speaking on behalf of the family, that's Jabeshe Misa Arthur, took time to acknowledge the presence of the president and how he had even helped in the organization of the funeral. He went on to thank some or the schools that for him laid the foundation for his life, mentioned his basic schools, even to Infantipim School, mentioning that they were all Methodist schools that helped him in his training as a young man.
Let's not forget, before the vote of thanks were the tributes, and some rather remarkable moments during those tributes. Also, the sermon was quite memorable. But I don't think I will ever forget Mrs. Matilda Mr. Arthur's tribute to her husband and the strong words with which she expressed her emotion while she delivered that tribute. So much was said. I mean, she said, I ask myself, is this Ghana? Are all these people in Ghana because the maligning, the lies, the treachery, the wickedness, the deliberately changing things so that you could look better than others? She went on, she said, today I asked the same question. Did people really know my husband? Did people take time to know him? The false accusations, the lies, the maligning, did they know him? And then she says, we knew you, and we know you are a rare gem, and we treasure you, and we are very proud of you. 1,000 tears won't bring you back. I know, because I have cried. But I know that you made your mark in this country and beyond, and you touched many lives. And those who cared to know you, and those who gave you time to prove yourself, know what a rare gem you are. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, and you could summarize that to mean that it doesn't matter what people say. We who knew you know who you are. So, Kojo, usually at funerals, some would argue that this is it. This is the final moment. This is where it really hits hard when the body's been taken away and being lowered in the grave. And that's what we'll be seeing a few minutes from now, even as his body is being taken from the Accra International Conference Center to through some principal streets of Accra to the military cemetery. We know it's the new one because there's one at Osu quite close to the conference center, but that's not where he's going to be buried. He's going to be buried at the new military cemetery just around, or you may want to say at Burma Camp. And so we'll be bringing you that shortly. My colleague, or our colleague, Komla Adom, is at the burial grounds, but we're just waiting for the body to be moved from the Accra International Conference Center. But talking of the service itself, you've mentioned the tributes and the sermon, but it's interesting that during the sermon, the minister, who's the presiding bishop of the Methodist Church, the Most Reverend Pratt, took time to build his sermon on the values of Mr. Emisa Arthur, and spoke about how those values can be used to develop the nation, and even at a point extended it to the conversation to the continent. And well, he took time to mention some politically sensitive issues here and there, but I know that it will make headlines later. But for now, for now, it's his body. Yes, the vehicle has started moving. I can see that. All right.
To be flanked by the usual motorcade. You can see some motorbikes gearing up to do the necessary. As a military vehicle with those who are carrying the hearse sitting in it, followed by a trailer which has the remains of the former vice president placed in a position of prominence on top of this military trailer. This is a sight that many people, citizens of Accra will get the opportunity to see today as they meander through the very busy city, giving Ghanaians the opportunity to have that final encounter with the great man. But yes, very interesting what you were saying about the Most Reverend Awotri Pratt and what he had to share in his sermon. He's a man who doesn't shy away from speaking his mind. Very soon after his appointment in 2015, I know there's a story of him admonishing all Methodist priests to stop eating in chop bars.
Interesting.
He was concerned about their health. And he didn't stop there. He directed their wives to also make sure they cook them good meals. This is one of the many things that he has said in his usual blatant and frank speaking voice. Today was no exception as he spoke about some of the choices that people in political power make. He also didn't mince words in extolling the virtues of the former vice president, who, according to him, was a man who would never compromise on his principles, would never receive a gift which was inappropriate for his office, and continued to be a shining example. Someone worth mentioning by your previous priest, gives you a commendation for your values, then you know you've lived a good life, haven't you?
Interesting. So Kojo is getting to that point where he will eventually be buried. But it's also interesting to note how many who've spoken about him described him as a gentleman. I mean, for us in Ghana, having seen him serve as vice president, you could tell, or you can testify of his gentle nature. Even times when he wanted to take a swipe at opponents, you realized, well, I mean, this may not be his thing. And like his wife mentioned in her tribute, he had often said that he didn't find politics found him. So I mean, clearly this is the man we are talking about, a man who in many occasions, under many different circumstances, has been seen wearing a smile.
Indeed.
It tells you of who he is or who he was. It's sad that we now have to refer to him in the past. But
indeed, what a pity.
It is life.
But you're so right about him and his persona, and how it fitted, or perhaps in some cases didn't quite fit with politics. He seemed,
as we know it.
Yes. He seemed comfortable in government, but not always comfortable in politics. And there are instances we will all remember where he felt the need to play the the political game, but you could tell that it was with reluctance and you know, with a certain lack of familiarity that he played that role. He was indeed a gentleman. You were so right about that. The Vice President, Dr. Baumia, even said so very soon after his death was announced. Said that he was a gentleman, and there is no doubt about that.
Definitely, Kojo, when I see the organization and even what we are seeing with the march now, the slow march, it definitely is an honor befitting of a former Vice President of the Republic of Ghana. And definitely, like Kojo, so the slow march will continue until the final destination. That's the new military cemetery at Burma camp. But I was saying earlier that this definitely is an honor befitting a former vice president who has affected many in different ways. You know, you talk of his political life, but also most importantly, like the former president Rawlings mentioned, he played a critical role in Ghana's economy during his tenure.
Yes, indeed.
And it's just beautiful to see how, as a nation, we have taken time to honor the late former vice president.
Yes. Now, I recall so many of the comments that you were reading on social media seem to identify with the emotion that the former vice president's wife expressed in her tribute. But as you can well imagine, it's also taken a lot of attention on the day, and there is no doubt there will be a lot of discussion about this on social media and mainstream media as well going forward. But you can put yourself in the shoes of the family right now. You know, this is so final. You know, they are making a journey that they will never make again with him. You know, and by the end of this, once he is placed in his final resting place, they're going home alone, and that is it. You know, it's a feeling that no one should ever have to go through, but unfortunately at one point or the other, it becomes a part of life. Now, of course, the man himself will continue to be celebrated by many people, not just the Ghanaians who get the chance to see him on his final journey home, but those of us who only get the privilege of speaking about his exploits. I don't know if you may have met him a few times in your professional life.
At a distance, but not quite closely.
Yes.
But I observed him, and definitely doing stories about him, and during the campaign following him, and former President Mahama. That was just in 2016. Yes. I say just because, I mean, this event just lets you realize how, you know, every moment counts. It just looked like yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah.
And so, like I said, he appeared to be, or was a very gentle man, as said by many people, even his political opponents.
Yes.
I remember when news of his death broke, the president tweeted about him and spoke about his, for lack of a better expression, even his excellence in managing the economy at that time where he was at the helm of that. And so, could a difficult moment, like you say, put yourself in the shoes of the family or his family members, especially the nuclear. It is quite a difficult moment.
So later, what we describe as the final funeral rites will happen at State House. And this, to most people, is the actual funeral, isn't it? Because this is where you get the opportunity to commiserate with the family in the ways that we traditionally have established. He, of course, being a Fanti from the Akan tribes of Ghana, is going to have a very generic, typical format where everyone in the family will sit and receive greetings from well-wishers, and the usual nsawa and so forth will take place.
And in South, for those who are not familiar, even in Ghana with that kind of tradition, is basically some money you part with as a form of contribution or as a form of gift to the family, you know, and usually it's just to express your condolence and to express your support basically to the family. Obviously we know money can never bring him back.
No.
Like his wife mentioned, tears cannot bring him back, and she actually said she knows because she's cried her heart out. And so so that's going to happen, and a couple of other things as we do traditionally here in Ghana.
Yes, indeed, yes. But there's so much talk, particularly on social media, about the service, and you know, we don't want to flog it to death, but yes, there was a very memorable tribute by the wife of the former vice president. Now, I wonder, you know, we've already said, you know, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the family. This is a tough time for them, but I wonder what's going through her mind right now, you know, as she's following the procession, you know, to that final resting place. I wonder what's going through her mind right now.
Yes, Kojo, we can only imagine, and we can only know as much as he decides to talk about.
Yes.
But I must say at this moment that our hearts go out to her, and our condolences once again to the entire family, and not only his wife, especially his mother, who in her tribute mentioned that every parent would expect to be buried by their children, not to bury their children.
Yeah.
But she admits that as it is, life doesn't always go as you expect.
Indeed.
So,
and if anybody will know, it's a woman who has lived 90 years on earth.
90 years.
She's still very active, doesn't miss a single Sunday in church. She's a member of the Women's Fellowship of the Wesley Cathedral in Cape Coast. She's there every weekend. They also have weekly meetings, and she does not miss a single one. 90 years old, still contributing actively to her community.
In her church and in her community. And you know, clearly throughout the sermon and some of the tributes we heard, the former vice president comes from a Christian home, and we are told that the values of Christianity are embedded in their and his life.
Now, I wonder, you know, there was something quite intriguing that was said in that tribute, where she said people didn't give him the chance to prove himself. Do you think that was the case? Do you feel that in some way he didn't get the chance to prove himself?
Well, at this point, I think it will just stay with what she said. But I think the sense I get from what she said is the fact that maybe people should have known him better, and they would have had a different report of who he really was. I think basically, if you're going to ask me to do a summary of what she said, it will be that people have said things, but what they believe stands because they know him better than those people. It's also interesting to note that she questions if they still know him now, even after supposedly showering those positive
praises on him.
So the question is, it doesn't matter whether you're heavily criticizing or being or showering him with praises. The key thing is, do you know who it is you're talking about?
Yes.
Maybe something for us to ponder and think over. I mean,
people who live in the public eye very often become subject of criticism, and it's one of the difficult questions that they have to grapple with. These people who are criticizing me, do they know me? And if they don't know me, then must I take what they say personally? Because you can only be personal about someone you know personally.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's also interesting to note that some of the comments I just read a while ago on social media about her tribute had people saying, well, it's politics, you have to accept it, that's how we do politics. But others think that if that is how we want to define our politics, then it's not good, because in every sense of it, politics is actually just the exchange of ideas. But not only in Ghana, the world over, we have seen people descend to some really unfortunate levels, all because of politics. And you want to ask yourself that, can this be a starting point to rewrite the narrative? Can this be the time where we all say, we have to change the story. We can do it if we decide as a people to engage in decent politics. And in fact, this is not the only place we've heard something like this being said, especially during election years. You hear members of the Peace Council, you hear members of the clergy, you even hear some politicians come out to admonish their colleagues to be very circumspect in the things they say about each other, and also to have it at the back of their minds that it's politics, and it could be anybody on either side at any time. So, like I said, it's something we've been saying over. Let's be nice. Let's be polite. Politics is the exchange of ideas, not insults, not attacking people's personality or saying defamatory things about them. Kojo, my question is, at this funeral, this woman pouring her heart out, could this be the moment we decide as a country to redefine our politics?
It depends.
Maybe.
I mean, how big a task that would be, you know, not an easy task, not to say that it's impossible, but you have to ask yourself, what exactly are we asking people to do if that is the conversation we want to begin? What are we saying people should do? Politics of decency. What would be required for that to happen? Yes, a certain mutual respect. But would it go beyond that? Because all around the world, like you said, political leaders, people see them as their personal property, you know?
All right, Kojo, sorry to interrupt you, but the cortege is just going by the Bank of Ghana. Remember, he was governor, and this would have been a route he takes, you know, or he took at some point in his life for a very long time. And it's just a very emotional moment for me that his body, lifeless body, has been, you know,
and he contributed
taken
such a lot to this particular institution during his time there. And so, yes, this has a lot of meaning.
Exactly.
This moment right here has a lot of meaning. And yes, this is definitely the scene of some of the great exploits of his life.
Yes, and it feels as if these places where the cortege is passing have come to a standstill. You see people taking out their phones to capture the moment. Definitely it is the kind of world we live in now, Kojo, isn't it? You can't let it pass you by if you have a mobile phone. And people are also just standing by, waving, saying their last goodbyes, and just living the moment as it is.
Yeah, indeed. And we were talking about how the public tends to consume public figures, you know, and consume. Obviously, I mean in more ways than one. We tend to believe that these people who have stood up from amongst us to become leaders or to take responsibility, we tend to feel that like we own them because they are working in our name, and so. We don't know them. However, we judge them based on the things that they are supposedly doing that affect us. And we express our opinions in very binary ways about them. It's either completely good or completely bad. There's no middle ground. It's not often balanced. And this is human nature. It's emotional. And yes, indeed, politics needs to be cleaned up. So I like the idea of this being perhaps the beginning of a conversation. But the back of my mind, I'm also thinking about how realistic are we being if we expect that this will change. Look at how Donald Trump is discussed by Americans, in fact by Ghanaians who are not even affected by most of the policies that the American government, directly affected by most of the policies that they may be grappling with. Yet we all have an opinion of Donald Trump simply because we consume his public face.
But Kojo, I don't think the issue is with having an opinion or not.
It's how it's expressed.
It's how it's expressed. Look at the little boy there. Sorry, I just had to take this. Such a beautiful scene, very beautiful scene.
Throwing up a salute.
Yeah.
As the great statesman passes by.
Very beautiful. And Kojo, it's good to see this, even as we're talking about having respect for people and just appreciating people for who they are. First off, as humans, before anything else. So, like I was saying, I don't think the issue has to do with people sharing their opinion or having or having a certain feeling or criticizing people in public figure. I think the key thing is how it is done. And so we cannot take it away from our politics that people would definitely not agree with your ideas or with the way you're going about things, but can we be at least civil about it? Can I stay away from calling Kojo names? Can I stay away from saying things about Kojo in a manner that sounds as if it's a fact, when in real sense I may not even have any evidence?
Well, I would like you to. I would certainly like you to.
Exactly.
But I think the difficulty is always, especially, it's going to get more difficult with time because technology doesn't help. You know, you're sitting in your room and you can speak to the world, you know, on social media. And often issues of politics, especially in Ghana, really affect people's lives. You know, decisions made by leaders really affect us, either positively or negatively. And so it's like we need an emotional outlet when we think things are not going well, we need an emotional outlet. We need an avenue to speak our minds, just like his wife, Mrs. Matilda Mr. Arthur, needed an outlet. We also do when things go wrong, and that is what unfortunately leads to the excesses that we wish we could do without.
But in referencing her and having the outlet, I mean, you could see that there was no sign of insult, there was no sign of disrespect. She was only asking questions, but she made her point. I'm sure that is what she's driving at. You can be upset, you can say something, but I'm not sure if there's anybody there who feels guilty about anything she said. I'm not sure they would go with the feeling that she has insulted us or used a word that we don't appreciate. So it's quite a dicey issue.
Yes, a lot of the debate from what you were reading was about whether it was appropriate or not that she had insulted.
No, but some actually felt that it wasn't appropriate and that it's politics and you have to enter. And that's where I'm saying that others disagree, and they say that it's politics, but you can define it, you can refine it, you can make it devoid of insults and devoid of literally sometimes trying to tear someone down.
I would love to see that. Perhaps I'm afraid to hope for it because I feel as if it's one of the many things I would wish for and be disappointed on.
Well, it is human attitude, but like you said, but I think when we make up our mind to be civil, to respect, and I must say that this issue, this is not the first time this issue is coming up. We've had it countless number of times, especially during election years. So it's something that we talk about. But maybe this would give it some prominence. Maybe people would look at a grieving wife who has something to say about a system that she found herself in, hoping that we can, in the near future, prevent people from going through such things when they decide to come into public office.
One thing you're absolutely right about is that people will be talking about this.
Oh, definitely they will. Like we are talking about it.
No doubt began.
But let's talk about the man himself, shall we? Because we saw him on the campaign platform. We saw him share some ideas. We heard him times when, like you mentioned, he would reluctantly want to take a swipe at his opponent, but would do it anyway. And it became the news. It trended not only because it was him, but it was also because of the way he went about it.
Indeed. How spectacularly uncomfortable he appeared sometimes on the campaign platforms. Who can ever forget Muma Mizuba Kwen?
Yeah, you know.
And so many of the other times when he has attempted to go along with it, when it's so clear that that is not his natural habitat. You know, I will never forget when he talked about how we can think far. You know, completely getting the metaphor, the other way around. But it's simply because that is not his wheelhouse. You know, he was far more comfortable making decisions and, taking actions and speaking about the issues and moving things forward, as he had done throughout his entire career. It just occurs to me now that apart from the time he spent lecturing, which was perhaps about a decade or so.
And not only in Ghana, yes, in Nigeria too. As well.
Apart from that time, his only employment has been, well, in fact, even including the time he was lecturing, his only employment has ever been with the government. You know, because he was lecturing at the University of Ghana. So, yeah, he's only ever been a government employee. You know, his entire illustrious career has been in the service of his country. And that in itself, no matter how quietly you do it, is an act of heroism. You know, because, look, the attraction, the opportunity to take talent and skill into the private sector exists. And many people take that opportunity. But for some reason, in Mr. Arthur's destiny was to continue to put his talents to the use of Ghana. And he did so in every opportunity that he was given. And Ghana is most definitely better for the existence of people like him.
Yes, and we have a lot to show you in terms of recap about what happened during the service. If you're just joining us, this is our coverage of the funeral and burial of our late former Vice President, Pakwesi Bekwai Emisa Arthur. What is happening now is that the cortege is driving through some principal streets of Accra, heading to the new military cemetery at Burma Camp. And we've seen the cortege go by his former office, the Bank of Ghana. We've seen beautiful scenes of people paying their last respects, and a little boy who just held his hand up to his head in a salute, showing his last respect to the former Vice President. That one was a very beautiful sight to behold. And we also have been speaking to some people in the political space about what they would remember him for, about what they loved about him while he was alive. And so we'll be bringing you that intermittently shortly. But what's happening now, is the cortege going through some principal streets, heading to the military cemetery at Burma Camp.
Yeah, and that, of course, will be the final resting place of the former Vice President, Pakwesi Emisa Arthur. They've already prepared the site. We saw some images when Komla Adung took us there earlier, as well as our colleague from Ajman. And of course, that is where it will all be concluded in terms of his presence here on earth when he's finally laid to rest. And then, of course, we're going home to State House.
Yes.
I think it's fitting. And at that point, of course, the final rites, as we call it, will be carried out. But we've been talking about the man, you know, and the impact he has made, quietly made, you know, on the political and economic landscape of this country. And one thing I really agree with from the sentiment poured out by his wife is the fact that we really ought to celebrate people more while they're with us, you know? Yeah, why wait? Why wait till they can't hear you? You know, are you sure that the only thing you want people to hear you say about them are bad things? Are you sure? You know, so yes, a conversation has most definitely begun. And it's not just about politics. It's about anybody in the public eye. You know, sometimes people attract such negativity just because they have chosen to stand out. You see it with some of our actors and musicians, and when you put a foot wrong, the nation can descend on you sometimes. And it's only after the unfortunate happens that people suddenly start to remember what's great about you.